Hello students, welcome to session 7 of solutions chapter. In this session we are starting off with the last part of this chapter called colligative properties. Colligative is a Greek word in which co means together, ligare means binding. Okay, the definition may not literally sound the same, but let us understand the definition. See, colligative properties are the properties of dilute solutions of a non-volatile solid. So, these are the properties of dilute solutions of a non-volatile solid. Let the subject be very clear in the first place. Now, say I have got 4 different samples of solutions in which different non-volatile solids are present. Say one contains sodium chloride dissolved in it, one contains urea dissolved in it, one contains sugar dissolved in it, and one contains some other non-volatile solid, say glucose dissolved in it. Now, value of a given property of this dilute solution of a non-volatile solid does not depend on the nature of the solute, but depends on the number of particles present in the solute. Then you call it colligative property. Simple. So any property of solutions of dilute solutions of a non-volatile solute in which the value of the property depends only on the number of particles, not on the nature. Means, say the number of particles or the concentration of all these four solutions is same, then value of that particular colligative property also will be same. So, properties of dilute solutions of a non-volatile solid whose values depend only on the number of particles but not on the nature of solute. Depends only on the number of particles but not on the nature of solute, then such properties are said to be colligative properties. Is that clear? We have got 4 colligative properties. One is relative lowering of vapor pressure, which I must have already introduced to you. Relative lowering of vapor pressure, which often abbreviated as RLVP. Second one is elevation in boiling point, which symbolized as delta TV. Third one is depression in freezing point, symbolized as delta TF. Lastly, osmotic pressure, which is given by the symbol pi. Now please understand, when a liquid is added with a non-volatile solid solute, the vapor pressure of that liquid decreases. Now relative lowering observed in the vapor pressure is a colligative property. Please understand, vapor pressure is not a colligative property because we have already understood vapor pressure value depends on the nature of liquid, and that is the crucial factor determining the nature of liquid. That's why vapor pressure is not a colligative property. Nature of liquid is the crucial parameter to decide the vapor pressure of the liquid. So vapor pressure is not a colligative property. Relative lowering that happened in vapor pressure when you added a non-volatile solute is a colligative property. Similarly, there is a liquid, it will have some boiling point. You added a non-volatile solid solute to that liquid, then its boiling point will increase. We will justify that when we go to the topic. Its boiling point will increase. That increase is called elevation in boiling point. Again, please understand, boiling point is not a colligative property. You know very well, boiling point does depend on the nature of the liquid. Boiling point is not a colligative property. Increase in boiling point when you add a non-volatile solid solute to it is a colligative property. Clear? Similarly, when you add a non-volatile solid solute to a liquid, its freezing point will decrease. So how much it has decreased is called depression in freezing point. Again, freezing point is not a colligative property. Depression in freezing point is a colligative property. Okay? And lastly, how much it has decreased is a colligative property. Lastly, osmotic pressure. I will introduce what is osmosis and what is osmotic pressure, though you might have heard it already. Then we will understand how that is a colligative property also. So, this is the definition and the types of colligative properties. Again, remember, these are the properties of dilute solutions of a non-volatile solid solute. Okay, let's proceed with one by one. Let us understand the theoretical aspects and the formulae related to all of them together. Let us learn all of them together. Then let us solve the numerical exercises for all of them together, because they will be very similar to each other. A comparative study always makes it convenient and easy. Okay, let's proceed. This term RLVP was already introduced to you when I was discussing the Raoult's law for solutions containing non-volatile solute. Remember, the liquid has a particular vapor pressure at a given temperature. When a non-volatile solid solute is added, we discussed that clearly. When a non-volatile solid solute is added, because solute particles occupy the surface, number of liquid molecules or the solvent molecules on the surface will reduce. As a result, the extent of evaporation will decrease. As a result, the vapor pressure will decrease. Remember, this we have discussed. So, that day we assumed vapor pressure of pure liquid as P0, vapor pressure of solution as P. Then we understood as per Raoult law, P is equal to P0 into XA, where XA is the mole fraction of solvent. Because more the amount of solvent, more will be the vapor pressure of that solution. More the amount of solute, less will be the vapor pressure. And all this is done, I am just repeating it. And you know XA is equal to 1 minus XB. So by substituting 1 minus XB here, P0 into 1 minus XB, that gave you P0 minus P0 into XB, and rearranging you get P0 minus P by P0 is equal to XB. Remember? Now this ratio, that is ratio of lowering of vapor pressure to the vapor pressure of pure solvent, is called relative lowering of vapor pressure. So if you really want a definition, how you can write? The ratio of lowering of vapor pressure to the vapor pressure of pure solvent. Of course, the condition is when a non-volatile solid solute is added to it. The ratio of lowering of vapor pressure upon the addition of non-volatile solid solute to the vapor pressure of pure solvent. So, mathematically it can be represented as P0 minus P by P0, and from Raoult's law we have already understood that P0 minus P by P0 is equal to XB, that is mole fraction of solute. Mole fraction of solute. Now, see, when it comes to this expression called P0 minus P by P0 is equal to XB, you can clearly notice that this relative lowering of vapor pressure depends only on the mole fraction of the solute, not on any property that reflects the nature of the solute. Now what happens? I prepare a solution, aqueous solution of sodium chloride, I prepare an aqueous solution of glucose, I prepare an aqueous solution of urea. In all the three solutions, I ensure that the mole fraction of solute is same. Then the relative lowering of vapor pressure will be same for all the three solutions. That's why you say relative lowering of vapor pressure is a colligative property. So its value depending only on the mole fraction of the solute, not nature of the solute corresponding to the total number of particles. That's why it is a colligative property. Justified. Whenever they ask you to justify, especially in board exams, they ask you to justify why a given colligative property, why a given property is colligative property. Very simple. You write important mathematical expressions like this, and you mention why it is a colligative property, because it is depending only on the number of particles of the solute, mole fraction of the solute. Okay, clear? Now, while introducing the colligative properties, I forgot to introduce a very crucial point, which I'll do it now. That is, colligative properties are the important tool for determining molar masses of unknown solutes. See, you should have studied first year when you were studying composition of organic compounds and all, you should have studied clearly that we do qualitative analysis and find which elements are present. Then we do quantitative analysis and find percentage by mass of each element. Now you got percentage by mass, you can determine empirical formula. The calculation of empirical formula from percentage by mass of each element also you have learnt last year. Now, after calculating empirical formula obtained from quantitative analysis, from the percentage compositions obtained from qualitative analysis, you determine empirical formula by simple calculation on paper. Then to get molecular formula, what do you need? You need molecular mass. Yes or no? See, for us it's a habit. You know formula C6H12O6, you add all the atomic masses and say a molecular mass is 180. You know formula H2O, add all the atomic masses and say 18. You know the formula NH2 taken twice CO, that is urea. So you add all the atomic masses and say molecular mass is 60. For us, first we get the formula, then we add atomic masses and tell the molecular mass theoretically very happily. Whereas when it comes to scientists, compound comes as unknown compound to the laboratory, they know nothing about it, then they will find which elements are present by doing qualitative analysis. Then they find what percentage of each element is present by doing quantitative analysis. Then from the percentage compositions they will determine empirical formula. Then on the other side they will determine molecular mass also experimentally. From the experimentally determined molecular mass and the empirical formula obtained from percentage compositions, they will determine molecular formula, which you have already studied. That means please understand, for scientists, first they determine molecular mass, then they find out the molecular formula. After they gave us the molecular formula, we are sitting happily at our places and adding atomic masses and getting molecular mass very conveniently. But that is not as easy. So determination of molecular mass when a compound comes newly to the laboratory is an absolutely experimental process. Now, what kind of experiment do they set up for determining molecular mass of a given substance depends on the nature of the substance. For example, for volatile liquids, they employ a method called Victor-Meyer's method, which is not part of our syllabus, but for your curiosity, you can learn that when time permits. So for volatile liquids, they use Victor-Meyer's method. Similarly, for gases, they employ vapor density method for determining molecular masses. Vapor density into 2 is equal to molecular mass, you know very well. So they find vapor density experimentally and then determine molecular mass. Similarly, for non-volatile solid solutes, to determine molecular mass, they employ colligative properties method. Means what do? They dissolve the unknown solute into a suitable liquid in which it is soluble. How it will be soluble we have already understood, like dissolves like. So they select a suitable solvent and dissolve this non-volatile solid solute into it and prepare a dilute solution. Then determine any one of these 4 colligative properties for the dilute solution. From the value of colligative property, they find out molecular mass. So every one of these 4 colligative properties are useful in finding molecular masses of unknown solutes. That means every one of these 4 colligative properties should be related to molecular mass of the solute so that we can find out eventually. Is that clear? So after understanding the definition, after understanding the formula of a given colligative property, you should also understand the relation between molar mass and the colligative property. That is what I am doing now. That's why I gave so much introduction. Let's go. molar mass of solute, using RLVP. Using relative lowering of vapor pressure, how do we find molar mass of solute? See children, we know that mole fraction of solute Xb is equal to Nb divided by Na plus Nb, that is number of moles of solute divided by number of moles of solvent plus number of moles of solute, that is total number of moles of solution. Correct? Now, see here, for dilute solutions, this I have done many times already, and let me repeat that. For dilute solutions, number of moles of solute will be very, very small as compared to number of moles of solvent. Like say, if number of moles of solute is 0.1, number of moles of solvent could be 5 or 6. Number of moles of solute is 0.01, number of moles of solvent is 5 or 6. Now, number of moles of solvent is 5 and that of solute is 0.01, then Na plus Nb if you do, 5 plus 0.01 is nothing but 5.001, which is as good as 5 for all the theoretical requirements. So, for dilute solutions I can take Na plus Nb is almost equal to Na, so I can write Xb is equal to Nb by Na. Xb is equal to Nb by Na. Now, you know very well number of moles of solute is mass of solute by molar mass of solute, and number of moles of solvent is mass of solvent by molar mass of solvent. Mass of solvent by molar mass of solvent. Right. Now substituting that here, you will get Wb into Ma by Wa into Mb. Correct? So in the place of mole fraction I can take Wb into Ma, where Wb is the weight of solute, Ma is the molar mass of solvent, Wa is the weight of solvent, Mb is the molar mass of solvent. I can substitute that here. So P0 minus P by P0 is equal to weight of solute into molar mass of solvent divided by weight of solvent into molar mass of solute. Now what did we need? Molar mass of solute. So bring it onto the LHS. So molar mass of solute is equal to weight of solute into molar mass of solvent divided by weight of solvent into relative lowering of vapor pressure. This is the very, very, very important formula that we need. Now I would suggest, instead of going for by hearting this formula, try to remember the basic formula. That is Raoult's law. Relative lowering of vapor pressure is equal to mole fraction of solute. Then substituting Nb by Na in the place of Xb, and then replacing Nb by Na by Wb into Ma by Wa into Mb should not be a big problem if you have clarity in the subject. Clear? Instead of trying to by heart. Now why I am insisting on this formula so much? See, experimentally in the laboratories also this formula is very important. They prepare dilute solution, find out RLVP, then using this formula they will determine molar mass of the solute from the value of RLVP. They would have decided what weight of solute to dissolve and in which solvent to dissolve, so they will know molar mass, and in how much solvent it should be dissolved and how much of solute should be dissolved. All that is in our hands. Accordingly, they prepare a solution with known quantities and determine RLVP, and using this formula they will find molar mass of that unknown solute. So it is important in the laboratories also scientifically, number one. Number two, in your board exam, in question number 27 if I am not wrong, 2 parts, it will be a 5-mark question where there will be 2 parts, 1 and 2. 2 will be 2 marks question. 1 of question number 27 will be a 3 marks question. And the 3 marks question will be necessarily a numerical based on determination of molar mass, either using RLVP or using delta TB or using delta TF or using osmotic pressure. Means these 4 relations which we are going to get by the end of this session, that is relation between molar mass and RLVP, or molar mass and elevation in boiling point, or molar mass and depression in freezing point, or molar mass and osmotic pressure. From these 4 relations, from any one relation, surely a 3 marks numerical is guaranteed in your board exams. At the same time, in entrance exams also plenty of questions will be asked based on this. So now I repeat, whenever we are studying a colligative property, its definition has to be understood, then its mathematical expression has to be understood, and from that mathematical expression, how you derive relation between molar mass of solute and that colligative property, that relation has to be understood. These three are most important aspects, and four equally important. Why it should be, the justification for why it is a colligative property, and that justification comes from the mathematical relation only. Clear? Of course, RLVP is not yet over, but the crucial elements of it are over. That is mathematical expression for RLVP, how to calculate RLVP if number of moles of solute and number of moles of solvent are given, or masses of solute and solvent are given, by mentioning the formula. If they mention the formula, molar masses we can get easily. Then they give you mass of solute and mass of solvent. Then you find mole fraction and substitute and get your RLVP. Whereas RLVP is given, molar mass of solute is asked. Then how you are going to determine molar mass of solute? This much we have done. There are few more aspects to wind up RLVP. We'll proceed now. See, let us learn an alternative formula for RLVP and relation of RLVP with mole fraction. Means here, I am not exactly meaning finding RLVP, finding molar mass from RLVP is more importantly to be understood here. Okay, now, say, if the solution is not dilute, first let me write the basic formula we already know. That is P naught minus P by P naught is equal to XB is the formula. If it is not a dilute solution, I cannot take Na plus Nb is almost equal to Na. That's why I should retain it as Nb by Na plus Nb. See, if it is only finding RLVP, not an issue. Please understand that. See, you will find number of moles of solute, you will find number of moles of solvent, then you will take the thing here, add them, take the ratio, not an issue. Whereas if you have to find weight of solute or weight of solvent from it, or molar mass of solute or molar mass of solvent from it, then it will be very tricky. See here, WB by MB divided by WB by MB plus WA by MA. This would be the final relation. P naught minus P by P naught is equal to WB by MB by WB by MB plus WA by MA. Now, if he has given all these parameters WB, MB, WA, MA, then doing these ratios, substituting here and getting P naught minus P by P naught, that is getting RLVP, is not a problem. Whereas if we have to find any of these parameters from the, if RLVP is given, like we talked about determination of molar mass just now, for a solution which is not dilute, then we have an easier and convenient formula that we are about to derive now. Okay, see here, let us do that. See, P naught minus P by P naught is equal to NB by NB by Na plus Nb. This we have already established. Now let me take the reciprocal of it. That is P naught by P naught minus P is equal to Na plus Nb divided by Nb, it is going to be. Correct? Huh? Now, if I simplify Na by Nb, N plus Nb by Nb, if you take, it becomes 1 plus Na by Nb. Correct? Huh? Now, take it here. P naught minus P naught, P naught by P naught minus P is equal to 1 plus Na by Nb, it is going to be. Okay? Let me bring one this side. P naught by P naught minus P minus 1 is equal to Na by Nb. Take the LCM. Take the LCM. Then it is going to be P naught minus P. So it becomes P naught plus P divided by P naught minus P is equal to Na by Nb. P naught gets cancelled, so you are left with P, that is vapor pressure of solution. P by P naught minus P is equal to Na by Nb, or you can write P naught minus P by P, whereas RLVP is P naught minus P by P naught, but here P naught minus P by P is equal to Nb by Na. Now Nb by Na will be P naught minus P by P is equal to Wb into Ma by Mb Wa into Mb. Therefore, you can find Mb is equal to Wb into Ma divided by Wa into P naught minus P by P. What was the formula we got previously when it was dilute solution and we took Na plus Nb almost equal to Na? We got Mb is equal to Wb into Ma divided by Wa into P naught minus P by P naught you got. Correct? So logic is simple. If the solution is dilute and vapor pressure of liquid, pure liquid and vapor pressure of solution are given to you, then use this formula. Solution is dilute. So in this formula, we have considered Na plus Nb is almost equal to Na. That's why you got this formula. Correct? When you have P naught minus P by P naught. That is lowering of ratio of lowering of vapor pressure to the vapor pressure of pure solvent. Whereas if you have lowering of vapor pressure to the vapor pressure of solution in the formula, then we have not ignored Na plus Nb. We have taken Na plus Nb as such and we have derived this. Yes or no? That means we are not considering it as a dilute solution. We are not considering number of moles of solute negligible compared to number of moles of solvent. Without considering that, I will be able to solve and get the molar mass of solute, and that will be easier and more convenient. Understood? So it is a quickly solvable and easier formula even without considering Na plus Nb is equal to Na, because the solution is mentioned not dilute enough. Means you are not seeing large difference in number of moles of solute and solvent. In such case, you can do this. You can use this formula. Otherwise, finding molar mass of solute using this relation would be quite difficult numerically. Understood? Easy, right? Let's proceed to experimental determination of RLVP. Okay. Relative lowering of vapor pressure of any given solution which is prepared using a given solvent is determined by experimentally by a very popular method named as Ostwald-Walker dynamic method, which in all the curricula we need. Otherwise, there are other methods also. Now, let us understand the experimental setup of Ostwald-Walker dynamic method and then proceed to the mathematical principle behind it. See, there are a set of 6 glass bulbs being shown here. For accuracy, they may take any number. Minimum we are using here. There are a set of 6 glass bulbs in which first set of bulbs contain solution in them. So these are solution bulbs, means I have added a non-volatile solid solute to the solvent and prepared a solution, and I have filled that solution approximately up to 50% of these bulbs. I mean half of the bulbs. Then next set of bulbs are pure solvent bulbs, means using whichever the solvent I have prepared solution, same solvent in its pure state will be taken in this set of bulbs. And further, these 6 bulbs are continuously connected to each other through U-shaped glass tubes, delivery tubes, and the delivery tubes continue to a series of U-shaped tubes. Again, any number can be taken, minimum we have drawn 3 U-shaped tubes which contain a drying agent. Most popular drying agents, otherwise called as desiccants. Most popular desiccant is calcium chloride, but even phosphorus pentoxide or concentrated sulfuric acid could be used. But generally, most of the books write calcium chloride. So I can call them calcium chloride tubes. Right. Now you please understand. Dry air, a stream of or a current of dry air will be passed from this end into the bulbs. Now what happens? Half of 50%. See, by the way, to maintain thermostat, all these 6 bulbs, solution bulbs as well as pure solvent bulbs, are kept in water. So they are kept in water to maintain constant temperature, thermostat. Okay. Now, so up to 50% I have taken the solution. Remaining 50% of the vessel is empty and the solution would have evaporated. So the rest of the bulb contains vapors of the solution. Now they are exerting some vapor pressure. Corresponding to that vapor pressure of solution, the air gets saturated with the vapors here. Means please understand. By the way, before setting up, all of them are weighed actually. Before the experiment is commenced, before the current of air is passed, all the bulbs as well as tubes are weighed and their weight is noted. Accurately weighed and the weight is noted. Okay. Now, the air which is passing into solution bulbs getting saturated with the vapors of solution as per the vapor pressure of the solution. Okay. Now further, the air is passing into solvent bulbs. Now tell me, which contains more vapor pressure, pure solvent or solution? You are absolutely right. Pure solvent has more vapor pressure. Due to addition of non-volatile solid solute, vapor pressure is decreased. We have been studying that. So here the vapor pressure is greater. Now already they were saturated with some vapor pressure P here, whereas its vapor pressure is P naught here, which is larger than P. Now when air continues to pass here, the air will be saturated with the vapors corresponding to the difference in the vapor pressure in both the bulbs. Here the vapor pressure was P, here the vapor pressure is P naught. P naught is larger than P. So here it will be absorbing vapors corresponding to P naught minus P. So please understand, here loss of weight corresponding to the vapors corresponding to the pressure P is lost. Here the weight in the bulbs corresponding to P naught minus P is lost, because the air is getting saturated with only so much of vapors. Clear? Now, the entire air that was carrying these vapors of the pure liquid as well as solution will be passed through U-shaped tubes. In U-shaped tubes, because there is a drying agent or desiccant, it will absorb the vapors of all the liquid as well as pure liquid as well as solution which air was carrying. Completely air will be dehydrated. Air will be dehydrated. That means vapors of this liquid will be completely absorbed here, such that at the end only dry air will pass out. At the end what will pass out? Dry air will pass out. Because of which, now what is happening? Because this liquid is converted into vapors and those vapors are absorbed by air, the weight of the solution and solvent bulbs would have reduced. Now because all those vapors are absorbed here, the weight of calcium chloride tubes will be increased. Now, the decrease in weight of solution bulbs, will be proportional to the vapor pressure of solution here P, because air is going to absorb vapors corresponding to the vapor pressure of that solution. Correct? Then decrease in weight of solvent bulbs, pure solvent bulbs, will be corresponding to difference in P naught and P, because already they were saturated with P here. So when air continues to pass here, the pressure difference only will decide how many vapors it should further absorb. That's why the decrease in weight of solvent bulbs will be proportional to P naught minus P. So total decrease in all the glass bulbs, total decrease in bulbs will be P plus P naught minus P, which is equal to P naught, and the weight lost here is only gained here, right? So that is equal to gain in calcium chloride tubes. Therefore, if I take the ratio loss of weight in solvent bulbs to gain of weight in U-shaped tubes, then what was loss of weight in solvent bulbs proportional to? P naught minus P. What of gain of weight in calcium chloride tubes proportional to? Gain of weight in calcium chloride tube was proportional to P naught. So if I take the ratio, what happens? It will be ratio of loss of weight in solvent bulbs by gain of weight in U-shaped tubes will be P naught minus P by P naught, which is nothing but the relative lowering of vapor pressure. That's how, by finding accurately the weights before passing the air for both bulbs and tubes, and by finding accurately the weight after passing the air and after completely dry air is expelled, using the weights that are obtained, taking this ratio, they are going to experimentally determine relative lowering of vapor pressure for any particular solution. So as I was telling you, when an unknown solute comes to the laboratory, its relative lowering of vapor pressure can be determined, so that using that, its molar mass can be identified. I told you, right? Using the calculations which we got. Now for doing that, what they have to do, they have to select a solvent in which the unknown solute is soluble, prepare the solution, take the solution bulbs, then take the pure solvent here, take the U-shaped tubes containing calcium chloride there, perform the process, find relative lowering of vapor pressure. Substitute the value of relative lowering of vapor pressure in the molar mass formula that we derived previously and get the molar mass of the unknown solute. That's how experimentally colligative properties are useful in the laboratory. And this is how the value of RLVP is determined by the famous method called Ostwald-Walker dynamic method. Okay. With this, RLVP is finished. Now let me proceed to the second colligative property, elevation in boiling point. Okay. Let's move on to the second property, elevation in boiling point. See, as we have already understood, if you add non-volatile solute to a pure liquid, its vapor pressure is increasing, and you know very well vapor pressure and a boiling point are inversely proportional to each other. So if vapor pressure decreases, boiling point has to obviously increase. It's simple and straight, nothing difficult to understand there. Now technically, how do we understand increase in boiling point? Means physically, how do we understand increase in boiling point? Again the same thing. Because you have added a non-volatile solid solute, because some of the bulk as well as surface of the liquid is occupied by the solid solute particles which don't evaporate, they not only slow down but also reduce the extent of evaporation. Obviously, when extent of evaporation is reduced, means when evaporation became difficult, you need to supply more temperature for the process to happen. That's why solution would have more boiling point. Already we established solution has less vapor pressure. Now solution would have more boiling point than the pure solvent. That difference, that increase in boiling point from pure solvent to solution is called elevation in boiling point. So simply, increase in boiling point of a solvent when a non-volatile solute is added to it. When a non-volatile solute is added to it is called as elevation in boiling point simply. Now, this can be understood why boiling point should reduce, at the same time arriving a mathematical expression for delta TB, elevation in boiling point. Both can be achieved if we can understand a little graphical representation for vapor pressure versus temperature. Vapor pressure versus temperature graph. So, if I take vapor pressure on the y-axis and temperature on the x-axis, number one. Now, see, while increasing the vapor pressure on y-axis, assume it reaches a value of 1 atmosphere. Why I am taking exactly 1 atmosphere? You know very well 1 atmosphere is nothing but 1.013 bar. Why am I taking that? Because that is the normal atmospheric pressure. Now when vapor pressure of a liquid at any given temperature, when vapor pressure of a liquid reaches atmospheric pressure, what does it mean? It will completely change into vapors. That means the liquid is going to boil. So the temperature at which the vapor pressure of liquid becomes equal to atmospheric pressure is nothing but the boiling point. Understood? Now, you know very well, with increase in temperature, vapor pressure increases. With increase in temperature, vapor pressure increases. First, let me take the vapor pressure of the pure solvent. Now, with increase in temperature, vapor pressure increases. Say, assume the vapor pressure of pure solvent is increasing like this. And at this point, on temperature axis, let me call it T0. At this point called T0, it has reached 1 atmosphere, that is normal atmospheric pressure. Then this will be the boiling point of the pure solvent. So, I am drawing a pure solvent curve here. I am drawing a pure solvent curve here, 1 atmosphere. So, vapor pressure of any liquid increases with temperature. So, it went on increasing and reached 1 atmosphere. The temperature at which it reaches 1 atmosphere is nothing but its boiling point. Now tell me, at any given temperature, will the vapor pressure of solution, after adding a non-volatile solute to it, will the vapor pressure of solution will be below this curve? Any point of temperature you take, will it be below this curve or above this curve? You know very well, addition of solute decreases the vapor pressure. So vapor pressure of solution will be always below this curve. Now say the vapor pressure of solution goes like this. So vapor pressure of solution also increases with increase in temperature, but the points will be always below the points of pure solvent at any given temperature, because at any given temperature solution should have lower vapor pressure than the pure solvent. This is the solution curve. Now assume solution has met 1 atmosphere vapor pressure at a temperature T. Now you only observe here how is the relation between T and T0. You can clearly notice T is greater than T0, which graphically proves that upon adding non-volatile solute and preparing a solution, the boiling point of the liquid increases. Without solute, boiling point was T0. When you add the solute, boiling point of that liquid has become T, where T is greater than T0. So delta TB is nothing but T0 minus T. Delta TB is nothing but T0 minus T. This is graphical representation to understand elevation in boiling point when a liquid is converted to a solution containing non-volatile solid solute. Now let us arrive at mathematical expression for delta TB, wherein we can even, using that mathematical expression only, we can even justify why it is a colligative property. Okay? Mathematical expression. Now, you tell me, what does this value depend on? That is delta T. We said delta TB, right? T minus T0 is nothing but delta TB. What does this value delta TB depend on? If you can notice very clearly here, the value delta TB depends on the difference in vapor pressures of the solute and solution, which is delta P. Nothing but P0 minus P. So delta TB is directly proportional to delta P, which is P0 minus P, that is lowering of vapor pressure. And what does lowering of vapor pressure depend on? You know very well, vapor pressure of solution containing non-volatile solute is directly proportional to mole fraction of solvent. That's what we studied in Raoult's law. Whereas lowering depends on mole fraction of solute. So more the mole fraction of solute, more will be the lowering in vapor pressure. So delta P in turn depends on mole fraction of solute. Directly proportional I wrote, not equal to. If I write delta P divided by P0, then it will be equal to XB. That you know very well. Therefore, from these two relations I can write delta TB is proportional to XB. To remove proportionality, let me use a constant K. then K into XB. Now you know very well for dilute solutions, just now we have discussed and many times we discussed that I can take mole fraction of solute as number of moles of solute by number of moles of solvent, because number of moles of for dilute solution, number of moles of solvent plus number of moles of solute is almost equal to number of moles of solvent. Correct? So in place of Na plus Nb, I can take just Na. So delta Tb is equal to K into Nb by Na. Right? Now what is Na? Number of moles of solvent. Number of moles of solvent is nothing but weight of solvent divided by molar mass of solvent, right? So in the place of Na, let me substitute weight of solvent by molar mass of solvent. Then it becomes delta Tb is equal to K into Nb divided by weight of solvent into molar mass of solvent goes up. Right? Now you see. K is a constant and molar mass also is a constant. Product of two constants can be taken as a new constant, and in this case, this constant is called Kb. I'll tell you what is Kb. And delta Tb is equal to Kb into number of moles of solute by mass of solvent. Got some point? Now you see. I'm putting boxes for everything that was not needed. Okay. Number of moles of solute by mass of solvent. Now, go back to your concentration terms and recollect which concentration term is expressed as number of moles of solute per kg of solvent. That is, number of moles of solute per given weight of solvent. Which concentration term expressed? You are exactly right, molality. So in the place of number of moles of solute per given weight of solvent, which is of course kg we take, can be replaced by the term molality. Therefore, I can write delta Tb is equal to Kb into m. That is, delta Tb is equal to Kb into molality. And by the way, Kb is called molar elevation constant. Molar elevation constant or ebullioscopic constant. Molar elevation constant or ebullioscopic constant, because the whole process or the whole phenomenon of increasing the boiling point of a liquid by adding non-volatile solute to it, etc. is called ebullioscopy. The experiment conducted in the labs is called ebullioscopy. And it is a proportionality constant used in ebullioscopy. That's why it is called ebullioscopic constant. Otherwise, it is relating elevation in boiling point to molality of the solution. That's why it is called molar elevation constant, Kb. Now, arrive at the units of Kb. Let me write here. Sorry, I'm messing up with the space. Units of Kb, how do you get? Kb is equal to delta Tb by molality. Correct? Delta Tb is expressed in Kelvin. Molarity is expressed in mole per kg. Now bring the things to the top. Kelvin, mole inverse kg. It will become. Or kg comes up and becomes kg inverse, and mole comes up and becomes mole inverse, right? That's why I can say units of Kb as Kelvin kilogram per mole. Repeat, Kelvin kilogram per mole are the units of molar elevation constant. Then the immediate question, why is elevation in boiling point a colligative property? The immediate answer, delta Tb is directly proportional to molality of the solution. That means, again the same way, I prepare a solution of urea, solution of glucose, solution of sodium chloride, all with the same molality, then the value of delta Tb will be same. So irrespective of the nature of the solute, since molality is same, delta Tb value is same, that means the property value depends only on the number of particles of solute in the solution, not on the nature of solute. That's why delta Tb or elevation in boiling point is a colligative property. Now what are we left now? How do we determine molar mass of solute using elevation in boiling point? That is what we are left now. Clear? So quickly, we have understood the meaning and definition of elevation in boiling point. Physically, we have understood why boiling point should increase when you add non-volatile solid solute. Then graphically, we have understood how boiling point increases when you add non-volatile solid solute to a liquid. Graphical representation, we understood that elevation in boiling point must be directly proportional to lowering in vapor pressure. And lowering in vapor pressure in turn is directly proportional to mole fraction of the solute. More the fraction of the solute, more will be the lowering. So delta Tb is proportional to Xb, removed and got a proportionality constant K, and expressed Xb in terms of Nb by Na, and substituting values of Wa and Ma in the place of Na, I arrived at an expression where you get a new constant Kb into Nb by Wa. Number of moles of solute by weight of solvent is nothing but molality. So you got delta Tb is equal to Kb into M. This is the ultimate formula you need to understand. Though I have derived it for your understanding, ultimately what you need to remember is delta Tb is equal to Kb into M, where Kb is called molar elevation constant or ebullioscopic constant, whose units will be Kelvin kilogram per mole. So far clear? Now the only thing we are left out is how molar mass of an unknown solute is determined using the value of delta Tb. Means an unknown solute came to the laboratory, I add it to a liquid in which it is soluble and prepare a dilute solution and determine elevation in boiling point. That's an easy process. Determine elevation in boiling point, and from the value of elevation in boiling point, I find molar mass of that unknown solute. Then I need the relation between molar mass of solute and elevation in boiling point, right? That we are going to derive. I have already told you a guaranteed 3-mark question comes for the relation between molar mass of solute and colligative property. Already we got a relation between molar mass of solute and relative lowering of vapor pressure, RLVP, sorry. Then we are going to get a relation between molar mass of solute and delta Tb also. Let us proceed. Derivation will be very simple. Relation between molar mass of solute and delta Tb. See, just now we have established that delta Tb is equal to Kb into M, molality, right? Now, we know that molality of a solution is given by the formula number of moles of solute divided by weight of solvent in kg. Now number of moles of solute is given by weight of solute by molar mass of solute into 1 by weight of solvent in kg, but majority of the times we will be given solvent in grams. So in the place of grams, if you want to, I am given grams, but I am substituting in the place of kg, then I'll have to divide this by 1000 goes up. So molarity is equal to weight of solute by molar mass of solute into 1000 by weight of solvent in grams. Substitute that expression here and get the expression for molar mass of solute. That's that easy. So delta Tb is equal to Kb into weight of solute into 1000 divided by molar mass of solute into weight of solvent in grams. Now you want molar mass of solute from that. So molar mass of solute is equal to molar elevation constant Kb into Wb, weight of solvent, weight of solute into 1000 divided by weight of solvent A in grams into the value of delta Tb, that is elevation in boiling point. Again I would suggest, don't try to memorize or by heart this formula. Try to remember delta Tb is equal to Kb into M. And already many a times, many problems you would have solved for expression of molality. Substitute molality expression and then arrive at the expression for Mb whenever you need it in the exams. Okay, this is relation between molar mass of solute and delta T. Elevation in boiling point of solution containing non-volatile solid solute. Now, before winding up, about Kb, elevation in boiling point. See, this constant Kb elevation in boiling point depends on completely the nature of solvent, depends completely on the properties of solvent. That's why using certain properties of solvent, the value of Kb is calculated. Using the properties of solvent, the value of Kb is calculated by the formula Ma into, what is Ma here? Molar mass of solvent into R, that is universal gas constant, into Ta square, where Ta is the boiling point of that solvent liquid, divided by enthalpy of vaporization of solvent into 1000. You must be knowing the meaning of enthalpy of vaporization. Enthalpy of vaporization is the enthalpy change associated with complete evaporation of 1 mole of any given liquid at a given temperature. So, for complete evaporation of 1 mole of liquid, what enthalpy change it will be associated with? And obviously, evaporation is an endothermic process, so enthalpy of vaporization will be positive. Generally expressed in kilojoules per mole. Based on the units of delta H, you take the value of R. If it is in joules, you take 8.314. If it is in kilojoules, you take 8.314 into 10 power minus 3 accordingly. Okay, so this is the formula required to experimentally determine the value of Kb for any given solvent. That's why when you solve the numericals later also, you will notice Kb for water is so much, Kb for benzene is so much, Kb for carbon disulfide is so much. This is how they give you the values, because Kb completely depends on the properties of the solvent for which you are determining this. So Ma is molar mass of, let me write, Ma is molar mass of solvent, R is universal gas constant, whose values you will decide based on the units of enthalpy of vaporization given in the problem for you. Ta is boiling point of solvent, and this is enthalpy of vaporization of solvent. Again, as I told you, if enthalpy of vaporization is given in joules per mole, then take 8.314 here. If enthalpy of vaporization is given in kilojoules per mole, you take 8.314 into 10 power minus 3. Or you take 8.314 here and what do? You multiply this by 1000. Either ways it will be fine. Okay. By the way, if it is given in calories, R value should be taken 2. If it is given in kilocalories, R value should be taken 2 into 10 power minus 3. So, whether it is calories or joules, that is important. 10 power minus 3 or 1000 you will manage. Kilo you will manage, that's not an issue for me. So, I repeat, joules 8.314, calories 2. This is how you decide the R values. Is that clear? That is about elevation in boiling point. Let us move on to the third colligative property, depression in freezing point. Okay. See, we have understood that addition of non-volatile solid solute to a liquid increases its boiling point. For example, water's boiling point is 100 degrees Celsius. If you add a non-volatile solid solute like urea, glucose, etc., the solution will have a boiling point 102.5 degrees or 105.6 degrees, whatever it could be. How many other degrees it is increasing. On the similar lines, now we have to understand that addition of non-volatile solid solute to a pure liquid decreases its freezing point. Again, if I take water as the example, you know water's freezing point is 0 degrees Celsius. Now, if I add a non-volatile solid solute and prepare a solution, pure solvent has 0 degrees Celsius freezing point. Solution would have a freezing point of, say, minus 3 degrees Celsius or minus 0.25 degrees Celsius or minus 2 degrees Celsius, minus 1.5 degrees Celsius, minus 5 degrees Celsius, minus 8 degrees Celsius, whatever may be the extent of decrease. Means the freezing point of solution will be lesser than the freezing point of pure solvent. This is what we understand from the very title. So I can simply write the definition. Decrease in freezing point of a solvent when a non-volatile solute is added to it. That decrease is called depression in freezing point. Simple. Now, before I go for justifying why freezing point decreases, I should go a little back to school. I know most of you know it, but for quick reference. See, I take a liquid and I am cooling it so that it becomes solid. The forward process is, by the way, called freezing. The constant temperature at which this happens is called freezing point, you may say. Then, for this solid to go back to liquid state, what should I do? I should increase the temperature, or I should heat it, I can say. On heating, solid becomes liquid and the reverse process is called melting, and the constant temperature at which melting happens, you may say, is called melting point. Now the question is, for a substance A, its freezing point in its liquid state, freezing point of liquid A is equal to T degrees Celsius, for example. Then can you tell me what is the melting point of solid A? You are absolutely right. That is also T degrees Celsius. Means please understand, freezing or melting points are the temperatures at which liquid and solids coexist. Liquid and solids are at equilibrium. So please remember, freezing point and melting point are equilibrium temperatures, though not boiling point. Freezing point and melting point are equilibrium temperatures. So at freezing point or at melting point, liquid and solid coexist. Therefore, I can give you a new definition for freezing point in terms of vapor pressure. I am defining freezing point. Now I defined you depression in freezing point. Now I am defining you freezing point in terms of vapor pressure. Freezing point is a temperature at which, freezing point is a temperature at which vapor pressure of both solid and liquid states of the substance is equal. Very simple. So please understand, the temperature at which vapor pressure of liquid substance equals the vapor pressure of solid substance is called freezing point. Or the temperature at which vapor pressure of solid substance equals the vapor pressure of liquid substance is called melting point. If you start the equilibrium with liquid, you call it freezing point. If you start the equilibrium with solid, you call it melting point. Logic is simple. So please understand, how do you justify that? It's understandable. Why? Liquid and solid are existing at equilibrium at this temperature. That means you know very well liquid evaporates. Liquid exerts a vapor pressure and vapor pressure is an equilibrium pressure. Now if liquid is remaining in equilibrium with this solid, that means solid also must be exhibiting the same vapor pressure, because temperature also is same. At the same temperature, both are existing. That's why freezing point is a temperature at which vapor pressure of both solid and liquid states of the substance are equal. Now, what about the vapor pressure of solution? That means when I am adding a non-volatile solid solute to it, it's simple. Vapor pressure of solution is the temperature at which freezing point of the liquid part of the solution, that means our pure solvent, freezing point of the, vapor pressure of the pure solvent becomes equal to the vapor pressure of the solid of that solvent, means frozen solvent. So, if vapor pressure of solvent in solution becomes equal to vapor pressure of frozen solvent, that is solid phase of pure solvent, then you say solution has undergone freezing. Then you say solution has undergone freezing. Point understood? To further get it clear, let us draw the same graph for vapor pressure versus temperature. Okay. Now if you draw a graph for vapor pressure versus temperature, again as I have already mentioned, the pure solvent graph will be above and solution graph will be below, no doubt. Okay, solution graph will be below. Now assume vapor pressure of solid, how it varies. You know very well, vapor pressure of solid does not change much because solids evaporate to very little extent. That's why even if you increase temperature until it turns into liquid, vapor pressure doesn't change much. So you expect vapor pressure of solvent to be something like this. Sorry, vapor pressure of solid to be something like this. Now let me name the curve showing vapor pressure of solid as AB, vapor pressure of curve showing pure solvent as CD, vapor pressure of curve showing solution as EF, say. EF, I'll mark F later, E later. Now, if I extend this here, please observe, this is the curve showing vapor pressure of pure solvent. This is the curve showing vapor pressure of solid, phase of that liquid, right? Now, they are meeting at a point C. That's why this would be the freezing point of pure liquid. This would be the freezing point of pure liquid. Now to get the freezing point of solution, I should extend the curve of vapor pressure curve of solution. Let me extend like this. Now, let me, this is A. Now let me name this point as E. Now the vapor pressure solution, vapor pressure curve of solution is meeting the vapor pressure curve of solid at a point E. So this represents where vapor pressure of solid and solution become equal. That point represents the vapor freezing point of the solution. Now tell me, out of these two, which is larger? T naught is larger than T. So T naught is larger than T. That means after it became solution, the freezing point is reduced. Therefore, delta TF will be is equal to T naught minus T. There for solution boiling point was larger, so T minus T naught we wrote. Here for freezing point will be larger for pure solvent, so I wrote T naught minus T. T minus T naught for boiling point elevation, T naught minus T for freezing point depression. Is that clear? That is the justification, graphical as well as physical justification for depression in freezing point. Up to this it is clear. Remaining, I am not spending any much time because it is absolutely identical to elevation in boiling point. How? See, again the same thing. If I want the mathematical expression for delta TF, what do? You can understand here, this difference delta TF depends on this difference in vapor pressure. So delta TF will be proportional to delta P, and we know that delta P is proportional to XB, therefore delta TF is proportional to XB. If I continue like that, I end up getting delta TF is equal to K into NB by WA. K into NB by WA into MA. Now K into MA both are constants, so product of constants can be written as a new constant, and in this case that new constant is symbolized as Kf, and NB by WA, that is number of moles of solute divided by weight of solvent, can be written as molality. So delta TF is equal to Kf into M, where Kf is called molal depression constant, or otherwise called cryoscopic constant, because this process is called cryoscopy. That's why the constant is called cryoscopic constant. Now units of Kf also will be Kelvin kilogram per mole. There is no difference here at all. Kf also is equal to delta TF by M. Delta TF also is expressed in Kelvin. Molality is expressed in mole per kg. Absolutely identical. No difference whatsoever. So that's how Kf, molar depression constant Kf as the units, Kelvin kilogram per mole, and delta Tf is equal to Kf into m. So mathematical expression for elevation in boiling point is delta Tb is equal to Kb into m. Mathematical expression for depression in freezing point is delta Tf is equal to Kf into m. Only the physical picture and the graphical understanding I had to take some time, otherwise mathematically both are absolutely identical. Clear? Now relation between molar mass and depression in freezing point. Again, determination of molar mass of solute from delta Tf also is absolutely identical. I am just rushing up. Delta Tf is equal to Kf into m, and you know molality is weight of solute into 1000 divided by weight of solvent in grams. I mean molar mass of solute into weight of solvent in grams. Now bring molar mass to the left side. So molar mass of solute is equal to Kf, that is cryoscopic constant, into weight of solute into 1000 divided by weight of solvent in grams into delta Tf, that is depression in freezing point. Point number 1. And point number 2, when it comes to Kf value, again Kf also is specific to solvent. Water has so much Kf, carbon disulfide has so much Kf, benzene has so much Kf. Kf also is solvent specific. That's why experimental determination of Kf value depends on all the properties of solvent itself. So again Kf will be equal to molar mass of solvent into R into Tf square, where Ta square, where Ta in this case is freezing point of solvent. Please don't confuse, because we are saying Kf, it is freezing point of solvent divided by enthalpy of fusion into 1000. So please understand, only difference is there it is boiling point of solvent, here it is freezing point of solvent. There it is enthalpy of vaporization for elevation in boiling point, but here it is enthalpy of fusion. That's why I would suggest always make comparative study of elevation in boiling point and depression in freezing point. Then now let us go to some practical applications of depression in freezing point. See, especially in cold countries, we India, no issues. In India, maybe there are very few states in which temperature goes below 0. So we don't have much problem here. But there are certain cold countries like America where for seasons, maybe 1.5 months, 2 months, 3 months, there will be conditions in a day where temperature is going minus 4 degrees Celsius, minus 8 degrees Celsius, much below 0. Now, you know very well, in car radiators, to keep it cool, we use water, right? Now, when temperature is going below 0 degrees Celsius, there is every chance that water freezes. If water freezes, radiator freezes, automatically vehicle doesn't work and it might affect the engine also. That's why what do? They add an antifreeze. I mean, instead of using pure water, they use an antifreeze solution. The antifreeze solution is nothing but aqueous solution of ethylene glycol. Remember, we have understood that ethylene glycol is highly soluble in water when I was teaching you concept of solubility. This is ethylene glycol. Now, when you add aqueous solution of ethylene glycol to radiator, ethylene glycol would have reduced the freezing point of water to great extent. Now, to how many degrees it has to reduce can be managed by adjusting the composition of ethylene glycol, by adjusting the mole fraction of ethylene glycol. Add more ethylene. If you understand clearly, the depression in freezing point is directly proportional to the molarity. Means greater the concentration of solute, more will be the depression in freezing point. Accordingly, by adjusting the concentration of ethylene glycol, you can decide how many degrees it has to be lowered also, so that your vehicle will be safe. This is one direct application of depression in freezing point. Another very important application, again same in cold countries like America, where winter comes, snowfall happens, the workers will be going around the roads and removing the snow for hours together for vehicles to move freely. In such cases, what they do, they spread or throw electrolytes like sodium chloride or calcium chloride onto the roads. Because of this, what happens? Because you are adding the non-volatile solute, what happens? The freezing point reduces. Now, decrease in freezing point means decrease in melting point, because freezing point and melting point values are same. Now, melting point is reduced means below 0 degrees Celsius, ice starts melting. So, when snowfall happens, when you have this here, the ice starts melting even at lower temperatures. This is one of the direct applications. These two are one of the direct applications of depression in freezing point. Similarly, I forgot to mention one interesting application of elevation in boiling point, that is in your pressure cooker. Of course, there we are not adding any non-volatile solute. We are building pressure by keeping the vessel closed and making the steam built inside. Because the steam is not escaping, pressure is built. Because pressure is built, boiling point of water increases. Because boiling point of water increases, increase in boiling point is nothing but increase in enthalpy of vaporization, so that heat can be transferred better and quicker. That's why food is cooked faster. These are certain practical life applications of these colligative properties. Again, should I have mentioned why delta TF is a colligative property? Delta TF is proportional to molality. So, solutions of different substances having same molality would have the same value for delta TF. That's why it is a colligative property, because it is depending only on the number of particles of solute, not on the nature of solute. Is that clear? That is about depression in freezing point.